I'm Nick Schultz, editor of American.com. I'm joined today by Bart Madden. Bart is an independent researcher who has come out with a new book, which you can see right here, called Free to Choose Medicine: How Faster Access to New Drugs Would Save Countless Lives and End Needless Suffering. Bart, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure.
Good to have you here. So, Free to Choose Medicine. Tell me what this idea is about. What prompted you to write this?
I've been reading stories about people with advanced cancer who had been dying and denied access to late-stage developmental drugs that appeared to be very, very effective. In fact, a friend of mine, Frank Burroughs, lost his daughter Abigail to cancer, and her doctor thought that a developmental drug not yet approved by the FDA, Erbitux, had a real chance to save her life, but she couldn't get into a clinical trial. In one instance, her cancer was in the wrong spot. In the second instance, she was too sick to be enrolled. So Abigail died, and then Frank formed the Abigail Alliance for Better Access to Developmental Drugs, and they worked to literally with patients on death's doorstep, trying to get access to these late-stage drugs. And
so when she wasn't allowed into the trial, that was just the end of the story. She couldn't take the medicine outside of the
right,
trial.
couldn't. So,
and that's because it's illegal for that, right?
True. So now, if we had free to choose medicine, patients like Abigail could make an informed decision and have access to a late-stage drug that had passed safety trials up to 5 years before that drug might get FDA approval. So that really got me motivated to dig into this whole issue. And I've spent 7 years on this, about 24 papers, and this final book summarizes the case as best I can.
Now, explain a little bit for those who don't know exactly how the FDA approval process works, because there are a lot of elements to it, and it's a little bit complicated, but explain that and how somebody who could be seeking a drug would be denied access to it.
Sure. The clinical testing nowadays, it costs a drug developer on average about 10 years and $1 billion to secure an FDA approval. And it goes through phase 1 safety testing, and then if it passes a safety test, it goes into phase 2 testing. And then the most rigorous one is randomized clinical trials and phase 3 testing, and then a period of anywhere from a year to a year and a half of analyzing the data, and then the FDA makes a decision. So as innovation is accelerating with medicine, we're going to be in a position where the most innovative drugs are stuck in the FDA's pipeline, and the approved drugs can be obsolete compared to what we don't have access to.
And it's impossible for somebody to get a drug unless it has gone through FDA approval.
Right, you can
administered by a physician.
Sure, you can enroll in a clinical trial if you can get yourself into a clinical trial, but you may or may not get the experimental drug. You may get a placebo. Now, the FDA has something called compassionate access. Now, that sounds great, but the FDA really is not motivated to have patients enroll in compassionate access. They want to get high enrollment in their clinical trials. So in my book, there's a quote in there from a former FDA examiner who dealt with compassionate access, and he describes it as getting doctors being subjected to the equivalent of an IRS audit. It is so difficult to jump through all these hoops. So the plain fact is we don't have freedom of choice to make an informed decision.
Now, the rationale for denying patients access to medicines until they're approved is that they may be dangerous and they could harm people, and so it explains why
Sure.
there's not just anybody can take whatever they want, right? So what do you say to folks who say, well, we need the FDA to make sure that the drugs that are administered are safe for people?
Right. That's the conventional objection to this free to choose medicine. First point is that there's no such thing as a 100% safe drug. That, for example, aspirin, even for elderly, patients with stomach problems, can be lethal. So all drugs involve a trade-off decision. There's the risk of adverse side effects versus the opportunity for health improvements not otherwise available. And we and our doctors are best able to make that trade-off decision.
So what is what's your proposal? You have a very specific proposal
Sure.
in this book for reforming our current system to try to help get medicines into the hands of patients who want them. What's your proposal?
Right. Here's a background. America needs better drugs sooner at lower cost. The reason we don't have that is because the FDA continually demands ever more expensive and extensive clinical trials. Meanwhile, people are suffering and dying because they are denied access to these innovative drugs. Now, as a practical matter, the FDA's primary goal is to avoid negative publicity from adverse side effects of approved drugs. But an important point is that the nightly news fails to inform us that the FDA is a real bottleneck in the system, and it ignores the fact that the result is an invisible graveyard of those who were, are, and will be denied access to the most innovative drugs. So, in order to achieve the basic goal of better drugs sooner at lower cost, we need free-to-choose medicine. And briefly, free-to-choose medicine is a bold, common-sense reform proposal that empowers patients advised by their doctors to make informed decisions on the use of not yet FDA-approved drugs that have passed FDA safety trials.